Good afternoon. I'm James Mackey, and I'm here today to talk to you about a low and flat tax, the most effective tax rate. In the United States, a progressive tax is enforced. This is less optimal than a flat tax because flat tax systems properly and fairly incentivize individuals, corporations, and entities with governmental ties. Flat tax systems incentivize taxpayers to file by being simpler, removing the need for a third party tax firm to correctly file taxes. Flat tax systems also encourage individuals to increase their earning potential without fear that they may lose a larger percentile of take home income to a higher tax bracket. The fairness, transparency, and simplicity offered by a flat tax system would prevent politicians from using tax cuts on specific groups as political leverage and would prevent wealthy individuals from finding loopholes in tax codes to avoid paying their fair share. A flat tax would alleviate many of the ails of a current tax system and ultimately increase tax revenue for the federal government. According to Thomas Sowell of the Hoover Institution, all that government can really do is change the tax rate. There have been some times when higher taxes have resulted in lower revenues, and other times when lower taxes have resulted in higher revenues. Simpler systems and lower rates encourage compliance and increase availability of capital for private investment, ultimately increasing the tax revenue of the federal government. During the 1920s, for example, the tax rates on the highest income Americans were reduced from 73% to 24%, and the income tax revenue rose substantially. The 1920s are not the only example of this phenomenon. According to the New York Times' Edmund L. Andrews, in 2006, an unexpectedly steep rise in tax revenues from corporations and the wealthy was driving down the projected budget deficit for that year. This is due to increased economic activity after the George W. Bush tax cuts. Additionally, under Ronald Reagan, the Economic Tax Recovery Act of 1981 produced similar results. Revenues exceeded that of the 1980 level in 8 of the next 10 years after the 1981 Economic Recovery Act program was enacted. Additionally, annual revenues over the next decade averaged $102 billion above their 1980 level, adjusted for inflation. Not only is there evidence that lowering and equalizing tax rates increases federal tax revenue, the current progressive tax system is particularly harmful to low income individuals. Large corporations and wealthy individuals most commonly have the capital to manipulate the current Byzantine system of taxation, which is so complex it's created an entire industry of third party filing services. According to Ben Popkin of NBC News, in 2016 alone, Intuit, the makers of TurboTax, spent $2 million on lobbying, and H&R Block spent $3 million, some of it on the same efforts. This industry is not a product of the free market, rather, it has become a necessity of a result of an unnecessarily complex tax system that is incentivized to maintain its complexity. According to Hall and Rabushka, the perverse tax system greatly worsens the incentives for entrepreneurs. The overall confidence of entrepreneurs is diminished by the current exorbitant tax rates. A low flat tax would remedy this issue. A world-renowned economist, Milton Friedman, suggests that the lower the tax rate, the broader the base, and the more equal the tax rates, the less distortion it introduces. This is because a low flat tax adds transparency to the system of taxing, makes paying taxes easier and cheaper, because, as Sowell indicates in his work, everyone would have more incentive to work and produce. The opposite is true under the current progressive tax system. For example, workers often pay higher tax rates out of the wages earned while working overtime. This clearly disincentivizes workers from working overtime, both a disadvantage for the worker and the company. Progressive tax rates are not a means of manifestation of equality under taxation either. Economist Narcis E. Mitu clarifies a common confusion in stating the importance to distinguish between the concept of equality to the tax and the concept of equality through the tax. Progressive tax rates in the United States are enforced as a mechanism of social engineering, detrimental economic manipulation, and overbearing and crippling federal government. Mitu goes on to suggest a simpler system of taxation decreases public resentment towards government in general. He states, if the degree of transparency of how the collected resources are used is higher, then taxpayers shall also accept with greater understanding the need for taxation. A low and flat tax is the most equitable, just, and prosperity-inducing system of taxation. Additionally, the current system of taxation, enforcing particularly high rates on the highest quintiles, forces jobs, investments, and entrepreneurs to places with lower rates of taxation. It's obvious in today's economy, which is strongly globalized, the capital and jobs migrate to areas where pressure is as low as possible. I hope this argument has been compelling for a flat tax, and I thank you very much for your time. Have an excellent evening.